Welcome back to the Deep Dive. If you're listening to this, you're not looking for a casual chat about the morning news.
No.
And you certainly aren't here for a generic history lesson. You are here because you're looking for an edge. You feel the ground shifting under your feet economically, the prices at the grocery store, the interest rates, the sheer impossibility of buying a home, and you want to understand the mechanics of why.
You want the blueprint.
Exactly. Today, we are acting as your strategic asset architects from Asset Move. We are taking the gloves off. This is a red-hot executive briefing on the state of your financial survival.
Precisely. This isn't entertainment. It's a threat assessment. We are looking at a crime scene that's over 200 years old, but the American economy is still warm.
So what are we working with?
We have a stack of documents here, letters from the 1790s, treasury reports, legislative logs, and they paint a very specific, very chilling picture. We're going to conduct a forensic analysis of the original sin of the financial system.
And when we say original sin, we're not being poetic or hyperbolic. We're talking about the specific moment the United States decided to monetize debt.
That's the one.
We're looking at the ideological war between Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton. And let's be clear for you right up front, this was a war. It wasn't a polite debate in a parlor.
No, it was a vicious struggle for the soul of the future, a struggle for the definition of reality itself.
And if you just look at the data,
The smoking gun.
specifically the smoking gun of the current $34 trillion national debt, it is obvious who won. Hamilton won. And because he won, we are living in what Jefferson called a doomsday prophecy.
34 trillion. It's a number that's so big, it feels abstract.
Almost meaningless.
Yeah.
But our mission today is to make it concrete. We need to unpack how we got from a manageable post-war debt in 1791 to a number that literally threatens the sovereignty of every person listening to this.
And more importantly, we need to look at the defense strategy Jefferson drafted, a strategy that has only just now, in the 21st century, become technologically possible.
That's the hook, isn't it? Jefferson had the philosophy, he had the moral compass, but he lacked the hardware to enforce it.
He was trying to fight a mathematical fire with paper and ink. Today, we call the hardware he needed Bitcoin. But before we get to the shield, we have to understand the weapon. We have to understand the Hamiltonian exploit.
Right, so let's go back to the 1790s. The Constitution is brand new. The ink is barely dry. You have Alexander Hamilton, the Treasury Secretary, pushing for two massive things.
A central bank and the consolidation of state war debts into one federal public debt. He called this a public blessing.
A public blessing. That is the marketing pitch of the century.
It really is. Hamilton argued that debt, if managed by the elite, would grease the wheels of commerce. It would create liquidity. He wanted to financialize the American experiment immediately.
He looked at debt and saw a tool for empire building.
But Jefferson looked at this and saw a trap. He didn't see an economic tool. He saw moral decay. He called it swindling futurity.
Swindling futurity. That phrase just sticks with you. It sounds almost biblical.
Well, it's accurate. Jefferson believed that the earth belongs to the living. That's his core axiom.
Explain that. What does that mean in practice?
If you pass unpayable debt to the next generation, you're effectively treating the earth as the property of the dead. You are enslaving your children before they're even born.
You're spending their labor to pay for your comfort.
Exactly. But Hamilton's plan wasn't just theoretical. The implementation was brutal. We need to talk about the corrupt squadron.
This part of the research really stood out to me, the corrupt squadron. It sounds like a villain group from a comic book, but these were real insiders.
They were, and it was worse than insider trading. It was state-sanctioned theft. Here's the situation on the ground. You had Revolutionary War veterans, farmers, soldiers who had been paid in government IOUs, bonds.
And these bonds were basically worthless at the time.
They were trading for pennies on the dollar because no one believed the new, fragile government would actually pay them back. These soldiers were desperate, starving. They needed cash now to survive the winter.
So everyone assumes these IOUs are junk. But Hamilton has a plan to redeem them at full value, par value. But he hasn't told the public yet.
Exactly. But he told his friends. The corrupt squadron moves in. These were congressmen and financiers who had foreknowledge of Hamilton's plan. They literally rode out into the countryside fast, ahead of the news cycle.
And what did they do?
They bought up these IOUs from veterans for 10 to 15 cents on the dollar.
Imagine that scene. You're a veteran, you're hungry, and a guy in a nice suit shows up and offers you gold for your paper. You think you're getting the deal.
You think you're lucky. You didn't know the plan. You sold your blood equity for scraps just to eat.
And then, once the squadron holds the paper,
Hamilton announces the funding plan. The value of those bonds skyrockets to 100 cents on the dollar.
So the wealth was transferred from the productive laborers, the people who actually fought for the country, to a financial elite, using nothing but information asymmetry and government connections.
That is the original sin. It was a redistribution of wealth from the bottom to the top, orchestrated by the state. Jefferson watched this happen. He saw that this wasn't just unfair, it was a systemic feature of central banking.
It created a permanent class of people who profit from the debt of the nation.
A symbiotic relationship. The government relies on creditors, and creditors rely on the government to tax the people to pay the interest.
And this leads us to Jefferson's most famous warning, which is really the core threat assessment of this briefing. He said that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies.
And that's the most important metaphor in financial history. Think about it. A standing army. It's visible.
It marches down the street. It can invade your land, burn your house. It's a physical threat you can see and fight.
Right. But a central bank, it invades your economic life. It invades your time. And it does it silently.
The sources break down the specific weapon banks use. The inflation-deflation cycle. Now, we hear about inflation all the time, usually framed as an accident or supply chain issues. But Jefferson was talking about the cycle as a weapon. How does that work?
It's a pump-and-dump operation on a macroeconomic scale. Jefferson foresaw the tactic. First, the banks inflate the money supply. They pump credit into the system. Money is cheap.
Prices rise, people feel rich on paper, so they take out loans to buy land, expand businesses, or buy homes.
That's the bait. They get the population leveraged up.
Everyone feels like a genius in a bull market.
Correct. And then they pull the rug, they contract the credit, deflation sets in, money becomes scarce. And what happens to the citizens who took on debt during the boom?
They can't pay. They default.
And the banks seize the real assets, the homes, the farms, the land for pennies on the dollar.
It's a harvest. They farm the citizens.
Precisely. Jefferson prophesied that if we allowed this, children will wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered.
That line always gives me chills. Homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. Now, fast forward to today. We aren't dealing with muskets anymore, but the math is the same.
The math is actually worse. Look at the housing market. Look at the cost of living. Since the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913, which is effectively the Hamiltonian bank on steroids.
What are the numbers?
The consumer price index is up approximately 3,000%.
3,000%. That isn't just inflation. That is a systematic destruction of value.
It's a death sentence for liberty. It is the realization of the standing army threat. We have a situation where interest payments on the national debt now exceed defense spending.
Wow.
The financial standing army is now more expensive than the physical standing army. The prophecy is complete. We are living in the wreckage.
That is a terrifying realization. We're living in the aftermath of the defeat.
Yeah.
But Jefferson didn't just complain. He tried to fight it legally. This brings us to a constitutional code. This was the original firewall.
Right. The battleground was the necessary and proper clause of the Constitution, also known as the elastic clause.
I remember this from civics class, but looking at it through this lens, it feels less like a rule and more like a software vulnerability, a backdoor that was left open.
It was a zero-day exploit. Hamilton argued that the government has implied powers. He said that if a bank is convenient for collecting taxes, then it is necessary.
And Jefferson, representing the strict constructionist view, said, hold on, convenient does not mean necessary.
Exactly. Jefferson argued that necessary means indispensable, something you literally cannot do without. He warned that if you confuse necessary with convenient, you open up a boundless field of power.
You turn the Constitution from a shield into a rubber stamp.
If the government can do whatever is convenient, there are no limits. He pointed to the 10th Amendment powers not delegated or reserved to the states and the people. But let's be honest, he lost that argument.
He lost because paper laws are interpreted by people, and people are corruptible.
Judges can be swayed, politicians can be bought, emergencies can be manufactured. This is where the pivot to the modern era becomes crucial. Jefferson was fighting a hardware war with software tools. He was trying to use words to stop power.
And words can be twisted. Necessary becomes convenient. Defense becomes offense.
Inflation becomes transitory, but code. Code is different. This is why we view Bitcoin as the digital realization of strict constructionism.
Let's unpack that. How is Bitcoin a strict constructionist system? Because usually when we talk about constructionism, we're talking about Supreme Court justices in robes.
Think of the Bitcoin protocol as a constitution that interprets itself. Bitcoin has no elastic clause. The protocol is immutable. The supply cap is 21 million.
There's no politician, no banker, no corrupt squadron that can argue that increasing the supply to 22 million is convenient for the economy.
The code doesn't care about convenience. It doesn't care about a war or a pandemic or an election year. It only cares about consensus.
It is the text that cannot be twisted.
In the Jeffersonian era, the Constitution was supposed to enforce boundaries. It failed because of human interpretation. Bitcoin uses cryptographic proof to enforce boundaries. It's physics, not opinion. You can't lobby the algorithm.
So if Bitcoin is the constitution that actually works, the unbreachable contract, who are the citizens? Jefferson had a very specific ideal for the American citizen, the yeoman farmer.
The yeoman farmer. This is the tactical solution. In the 18th century, the yeoman was an independent landowner who tilled his own soil. Why did that matter? Because he was self-sufficient.
He didn't need to borrow money to eat. He wasn't a tenant.
Jefferson said, "Dependence begets subservience." If you rely on the bank for your livelihood, you can't vote your conscience. You can't speak truth to power because they can cut off your supply.
The yeoman could tell the government to get lost because he owned his production.
Exactly. Now, obviously, we can't all go back to being 18th century farmers. We aren't going to plow fields in the suburbs. But the principle of distributed production and verification is what matters.
So what is the 21st century equivalent? Who is the digital yeoman?
The Bitcoin node operator.
The person running the server.
Think about it. When you run a Bitcoin node, what are you strictly doing? You're downloading the entire history of transactions, and you are verifying the ledger yourself.
You're not trusting a bank to tell you what your balance is. You're not trusting a website.
You are tilling your own soil in the digital realm. You are engaging in the sovereign act of verification.
That's a crucial distinction. Most people think owning Bitcoin just means having an account on a massive exchange. But based on our research here, you're saying that's still the Hamiltonian model.
If it's on an exchange, it's a liability. It's an IOU. You're back in the position of the veteran holding a bond, hoping the issuer pays you.
But if you hold your own keys and run your own node...
Your Bitcoin is a digital commodity. It's an asset. It is the digital equivalent of the gold and silver Jefferson championed.
And there's a security aspect to this distributed nature, right?
Yeah.
Jefferson wanted a citizenry that was scattered across the continent so that the central government couldn't control them all.
Precisely. Censorship resistance requires distribution. If you hold your wealth in a centralized bank, it can be frozen, it can be seized, you're a vassal.
But if you hold your own keys and run your own node...
You are sovereign. The network is too scattered to capture. It fulfills Jefferson's dream of a power structure that is impossible to decapitate because there is no head.
That's a powerful image. The server rack in your basement is the new plow. It's the tool of independence. It changes the dynamic from, I hope the government behaves, to the government cannot stop me.
It's the only way to opt out of the Hamiltonian system. And history shows us that opting out or fighting back within the political system is incredibly difficult. I want to touch on one historical event that really highlights this, the 1811 Showdown.
Ah, yes. The expiration of the first Bank of the United States. This was the moment the Jeffersonians actually struck back.
It was. The bank had a 20-year charter. It wasn't permanent, and in 1811, that charter was up for renewal. The Jeffersonians, the Democratic Republicans, mobilized everything they had to stop it.
And the vote wasn't a landslide, was it?
It was razor thin, incredibly dramatic. The renewal was defeated by exactly one vote in the House and one vote in the Senate.
One vote.
One vote. That is how close the U.S. came to cementing the monopoly permanently back then. And the Jeffersonians were willing to accept financial chaos, the friction, rather than submit. They called it the just price for liberty.
But look at the lesson there. It took a massive political mobilization, years of campaigning, political capital burned, and they barely won.
And eventually the centralizers came back. They always come back. Politics is a pendulum. The second bank was chartered just a few years later.
Because as long as the power exists, someone will try to seize it. Contrast that with Bitcoin. We don't have a 20-year charter.
Bitcoin has an infinite charter. It doesn't need a vote to survive. It doesn't need a lobbyist in Washington to convince a senator. It's ownerless.
It's renewed every single day, every 10 minutes, not by a ballot box.
But by individuals choosing to store their life force in it. That is the evolution. Jefferson fought a defensive war within the system. Bitcoin allows us to build a parallel system outside of it.
So let's bring this home. We've covered the history, the philosophy, the tech. But we need to look at the bottom line. Why does this matter today?
The bottom line is the data we started with. We have moved from $75 million of debt in 1791 to $34 trillion today. That is a 450,000 times increase. We are in the endgame of the Hamiltonian experiment.
The debt slavery Jefferson warned about isn't coming. It's here.
It is here. The dollars in your pocket are melting. They are designed to melt. That is the system working as intended. The inflation tax is the mechanism by which the past debts, rob a living.
So every time they print money to pay interest on old debt.
They're stealing value from your labor today. They're reaching into your savings account and skimming the top off, invisibly.
So the choice is binary.
It is entirely binary. You can stay in the Hamiltonian system. You can keep your wealth in a currency that is managed by the heirs of the corrupt Squadron, subject to debasement, seizure, and the whims of what is convenient for the state. Or you can become an independent sovereign. You can exit to the Jeffersonian shield. You can convert your labor into a digital commodity that has a fixed supply. You can become a node operator.
It's not just an investment strategy. It's a declaration of independence.
It is a moral stance. Jefferson said, "The earth belongs to the living." By adopting Bitcoin, you are reclaiming your time, your energy, and your future from a system that wants to consume it. You are refusing to be the collateral for the national debt.
We started this briefing by saying this is a survival manual. The facts are clear. The debt is unpayable. The standing army is at the gates.
And the defense is ready.
I love that. We often think of Bitcoin as this futuristic cyberpunk tech. But in reality, based on everything we've discussed, it's the oldest American dream, finally given a body that can withstand the attack.
Hamilton designed the chains. Jefferson drew the blueprint for the shield. Bitcoin is Jefferson's unfinished symphony, finally completed in 21 million unit code.
That is the command for today. Activate your node, reclaim your sovereignty, stay strategic.